Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Compliancy Guys. Today is Thursday, October 21st, and we're here with our friend Matt Lee. I'll let Matt do his own introduction because I know I'm going to butcher it. But Matt, as if anybody knows and has been following anything on Instagram, Facebook, and all the socials alike, Matt's pretty uppity in the whole cybersecurity space. He's been in this space for a really long time. He's now, I'm going to get the title wrong, Senior Director of Security at Pax8 as well, but has his own...
And compliance.
Yeah, exactly. So we're glad to have you here. Chat is open. I'd like to be able to have this as, free flowing conversation. Matt, take a moment, tell a little bit about you, who, what, where, and how.
Sure. I'll give the quick introduction, I suppose. So, I started out very early in life, bouncing career to career. I had my Series 7 stockbroker's license when I was 19 and Series 766 LHVA. Worked at Wachovia Bank, owned a mortgage company, owned my own private practice for financial, sold that. Started trading in gold and silver and bullion and numismatic and non-numismatic coins. Traveled around as the token white guy in the South for a diamond brokerage company made of Armenian gentlemen. I just got bored mentally every few years. It just wasn't enthralling anymore. And so when we moved to Kansas, I really kind of felt myself heading towards wanting to see what a technology career looked like. And so about 11 years ago, I started as an engineer with no experience in a small break fix MSP that had about 7 employees at that time. I was the 7th. We had under $1 million in revenue, and we were transitioning to the whole Peakonomics and seats on a bus model of becoming an MSP. Through that, I was there as we grew from 1 to 3 to 5 to 8 million or so in revenue, and merged with 3 other MSPs to reach that 20 some odd million in revenue space, and then acquired 3 more MSPs. And one of the things we did was we heavily integrated. So other than other people that might merge and keep separate and rule by EBITDA and try to get into purchasing agreements, we actually merged our entire operations space, right? So
Wow.
We use the same PSA, the same RMMs, the same processes, the same systems. We had a central services that ended up spinning up all SAML-based applications or IDC-based applications, and really wanted to build a very mature MSP product that could meet compliances. And so we were chasing our SOC 2 Type 1 and Type 2. We were also chasing CMMC 3. And so we were heading down those kind of spaces. And it all started, I was in Wichita, Kansas, as a technician, as an engineer, as a VCIO, ultimately as a VCISO in some ways, and director of technology. And we were very heavy in the manufacturing space in Wichita. And so I learned the term 800-171 many moons ago when it was still just a fledgling, hope you guys do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
All the way to the birth of CMMC and its expansibility and where it is today. And obviously it's not fully functional, but we're starting to see some movement there. So a little bit of background there. I decided though that my mission when I was at an MSP, thanks Zach, that's awesome. Yeah, I thought Wichita's great. And when I was at an MSP, my mission really was to raise the tide. My children, if I expect them to have the same life that I have in the next 40 years of their life, we had better fix some serious challenges inside the United States on how we treat cybersecurity, how we treat business in general, and its view of security and technology. And so that kind of started me on that mission path. And, we served almost 20,000 endpoints and 17,000 humans or so. And so I really felt like I was making a dent. But the challenge was there's 20 or 30,000 MSPs that all are trying to go through the same journey. And as a force multiplier, I realized I could probably make more difference by enabling, empowering, and giving the confidence to other MSPs going through the same challenge than I ever could do scaling a single MSP. And so in that thought, we worked out some of the details of my ownership and stakeholdership in the current organization that I was at Iconic. And I was offered the ability to go and do exactly that, to go move the needle somewhere else. And so I've now started at Pax8. I took on the titular title of, Senior Director of Security and Compliance. I am not an internal tactician. I'm not part of the internal operations team. I am absolutely just an individual contributor. I am here to shape hearts and minds. My job is to help change from the inside, but also I'm getting to do a ton of education. I started a security foundations course on the CIS controls, which I know you're heavily in, Tim. And I also am now being able to create content and do lots of things where I go help an MSP or present to for an MSP's clients or have conversations around, defensibility like we're doing today. So that's my short bio. I don't know if I maybe took 4 minutes or so when it should have
No,
been
you're good.
1 minute, but yeah, that's kind of what drives me and what gets me up in the morning. And so I am that person that if you reach out to, I'll gladly have conversations. I want to help Tim and compliance, you guys. And my job's to, in my mind, in my vision, before my eyes close that one final time, is to move the needle on security and try to change the face of what we can deliver as a nation around cybersecurity. So
I love that. I love that. We share a lot of the similar mindsets around taking this and the 20 plus, 30 plus brain trust, giving it back to the MSPs, right? And helping educate them in and around compliance, because compliance is pretty complex. I started with my first government contract in 06, maybe. So yeah, I don't even remember, with 850 Rev 2.
The grandfather.
And just about to be Rev 3. They were like just in that transition, Rev 2, Rev 3, and have been adhering to it year after year, upgrade after upgrade for years.
Right.
And, and it's interesting because all the things we're seeing in the news, especially in the last, 18 to 24 months, like compliance isn't going away, right?
Yeah.
I've probably said it a dozen times. Regulation is coming.
Oh, bro.
What that looks like, we don't know yet, but we know something's coming. So yeah, I'm really glad. I love working and having conversations with like-minded individuals, right? Because there's a lot of companies, a lot of smaller MSPs that just, they want to stay in business, and they know they need the help. And people like yourself and us here at the Compliancy Guys, that's what we're here for. So I love that community aspect. That's really great.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I'm here, right? And one of the things that I want to talk about today is really actually quite in the enablement space. You focus heavily on compliance frameworks, and I'm actually here to talk a little bit more about a security framework, right? And I know that's a little bit of muddy there, right? Because security compliance are somewhat hand in hand. But, compliance frameworks attempt to deal with some certain specific aspect, right? So NIST 853 is talking about government, DoD type information. 80171 is talking about CUI or controlled unclassified information, right? Your PCI DSS is talking about the security components around credit cards. HIPAA is talking about things around PII, PHI, right? Privacy is talking about, But CIS is a control framework that's much more focused on just pragmatic advice. It's much more focused on just prescriptive advice. And what I'm trying to, go ahead, Tim.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, what I'm trying to kind of point out, and we're changing some internal talk tracks at PAX 8 as a result of this conversation as well, is that for so long, MSPs have shot from the hip. It's been a bit of a fake it till you make it type engagement, right? Just the way MSPs were born. There's no regulation. There's no barrier to entry. There's not a single thing that says Matt Lee knows what I'm talking about. There's nothing. Other than some certifications and things down the road, there's no, you have to do this to be here. And what I mean by that is, if you think of a CPA, or if you think of an attorney, or if you think of a doctor, in various ways, they have either self-regulation, even FINRA and financial services. My Series 7 and 66, those are all through self-regulatory organizations. And so because we don't have that, it gives a lot of opportunity. People can be an MSP very easily, right? You can hang a shingle anytime you want to, go get a business license, and you are a technology provider. That's great. The challenge is it creates a little bit of this kind of nobody knows what they're doing, self-included. Right? When I first started doing servers, I didn't know the problems I was creating around security and those things. And at that time, it wasn't as big of a thought, right? 11, 12 years ago, people just weren't talking about it as much in the MSP space. So I say all that to say that MSPs have started selling security tools because they need to. They've started reacting to security incidents by buying better products or changing to a different email protection or changing different things, but there's never been a driving reason why.
Right.
It's just been reactive. It's just been the smartest guy in the room. The challenge with that is when you go to try to sell it, you have to say, well, why? Well, because I say so. Well, why? Well, because it's a good idea. I think we should protect you. Well, why? Now you can say, if you reference a framework like CIS, you have defensibility in your choices and actions. If you say control number 10 says you need malware prevention, 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3 go on to continue to describe the type of malware prevention I need and the way I need to do it and how it updates, how it functions, and how I manage it. And all of those things are prescriptive. They're all things that I didn't make up. Right. And so I think one of the first key components of this is really just understanding the transition from trying to sell based on your own charisma, your own belief in what you see there, to trying to sell based off of someone else's good ideas. Somebody else has said, this is going to reduce the bell curve risk, right? When I say bell curve, 85%-ish. If you do these 18 things, you'll reduce risk by X. But I think of it in this conversation of, as you said, there's regulation coming. I think that's going to happen. I think we're going to deal with some national legislation, whether it be on MSPs or whether it be on, actual small to mid-sized business, which I think would be much more effective than just regulating our industry in some way. But I think you're going to see it. But I think our death comes from privacy, right? I think our loss comes from subrogation of insurance companies, right? If anybody's not familiar with the term subrogation, it's essentially this: I took a loss. I'm going to hand part of that loss for the parties that are responsible. And so as you start seeing that, MSPs don't need to be good at protecting the client networks. You're never going to win, right? And I don't mean that to say you shouldn't protect them. I just mean that we're never, ever going to win. If I want to get into your client's network, I promise you, I'll get through every control you have. I promise you, right? With enough concerted effort, I'll get somebody hired, right? I'll bring in an insider threat. I would definitely have the capacitance to beat your controls.
You'll be putting USB sticks in peanut butter jelly sandwiches.
I do have a really cool rubber ducky thing I'm working on right now. That's going to be a video soon. So yeah, nice. I just got done spending a lot of time on that this weekend. But yeah, you're definitely going to lose. And so the point is when you do that, it's all about being defensible. How did I choose to protect you? Right. And I do this, I'm going to talk about it in a football analogy because I like analogies that work. So think about yourself as a coach of a football team. Right. And you walk out on the field, and I'm saying American football just because this can be sometimes international. I want to touch this real quick. So work to protect the network. Alan Miller, great friend of mine, amazing human. I've had to spend a lot of time in the last 2 years talking to Alan. Work to protect the network, but plan to implement and repair and replace when your protection fails. Yeah. What he's speaking towards, though, is iterative process, right? You start with A. If it's not good enough, we move to A.5 and we move to B. I like mixing numbers and letters, but we move on and we iterate. And I think it's about showing that iteration that is our defensibility, right? If a coach steps out and says, you know what, I'm going to put 9 people on the field as a football player. Tim, would they be a very good coach?
Probably not. Why
not?
Well, because they haven't taken advantage of all of the positions available to them.
They didn't use all 11. Yeah, 100%. Right. And a coach would be fired pretty quickly for that. If you were an NFL coach, you stepped out on the field and you put 7 players on the field, you're fired, right? That's just the way it is. You're really failing here.
Yeah.
So much too in the same way, I think that the CIS controls or NIST or any family of frameworks you choose to deal with, I happen to believe in CIS is the most easy to apply. And I'll talk through that in a minute. But if you know that becomes your playbook. That becomes the 11 players. Those 18 controls become the 11 players. And so if we continue on this football analogy, Tim, is there ever a coach that's a defensive coach of football that steps on the field and says, I'm never going to allow a yard?
No.
Be stupid, be ridiculous.
Yep.
Right. And so the point is that much too in the same way, we are going to lose. At Iconic, I had 37 numbered incidents that we dealt with last year, before July this year. We had over 100 last year. Right. And it's because we chose to write them down. We chose to figure out every time an account got compromised. We chose to figure out every time something happened that shouldn't. We wrote it up. We talked about what we could do better and how we could be better.
Right.
Right. And that's an incident response plan.
Right. One of the things that I learned out of the military was after action reviews, right?
Yeah.
Something happens, there's a process. And actually the military's done it really well on how to conduct an AAR. And taking some of those that I've learned 20 years ago and applying that to my MSP now has been really helpful. Like, who, what, where, when, how, why, and a process for understanding. And the one thing that I learned about compliance way back in 2007 was if it's not written down, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the camera. It's the other eye. 100%. And I mean, as you think about it, right? So this coach is on the field. They know they're not going to stop all the yards. The first mistake we've made is we've told people we're going to stop all the yards.
Right.
That's stupid. It's not possible. It's not defensible. It's not a reality of life. Yeah, maybe it's possible there. But you're basically saying, hey, listen, I won't let the touchdown happen. But my goal is to stop the yards, right? And my goal is to stop that next set of downs. And I think what we have to start thinking about is how do we prove defensible actions around that choice? And so I'll take an example from football. Let's say you're a defensive coach and you have a guard, the left guard. And the reason I choose left guard is Derek was my left guard and he sucked and he was my buddy. But, and let's say that, real talk, but let's say that left guard's getting killed all the time. And that offensive lineman is able to just shove him into a hole and make a giant running lane right there at the 3-hole every time.
Every time.
Right. And so the challenge you have as a coach is that you now know that your linebackers are going to have to come down and cover. Your corner's going to have to come in to cover. Your safety's going to have to come in to cover that space. And you're going to have an over-the-top problem that you can't deal with. So as a coach, your only defensible actions are either giving that guard coping mechanisms, like saying, hey, step back and take a knee so they can't shove you anymore, right? Like just control the lane, make it smaller, or go to the gym. You got to eat your Wheaties there, bro, right? Like go to the gym, or I need a new guard. And I think a coach being able to show that iterative improvement, to show that improvement in that guard so they know they're on the next recruiting class or they're on the next, right? You can start showing that they're aware of the operations of their team and they're aware of the things that they're going to fail and they're aware of where their weaknesses and gaps are. When you start thinking about an MSP, there's two parts of this. There's my environment because it's under huge attack. We are a force multiplier for threat actors. If they can compromise me, they can compromise my 600 clients when I was at Iconic. Right? They can do those things that are really, really big compared to chasing down 600 clients. And so they understand that. So there's the first part. But then there's also the client and talking them into it, and getting them into the hearts and minds problem. Because a lot of things aren't tools. A lot of things aren't having better shoulder pads or having a better helmet, better cleats or better knee pads. It's really about having a better guard. It's about having good processes and having the ability to document your improvements in those processes. And so why does compliance fit in? Well, compliance is the framework to prove that you've done the things, right? Compliance and gathering artifacts and gathering the information you need are what give you defensibility. If that coach goes into his review and they're like, listen, we've lost half of our games this year. Let me show you my plan. Let me show you where we're failing. Here's where I need your help. Here's where the gaps are. Here's the things I've done to prevent this. That coach probably keeps their job.
Right.
That coach comes in and goes, yeah, I have no idea. I don't know what's happening, guys. They're not going to stay around.
They're not.
And we find ourselves in that coach's position that doesn't know where things are and what's going wrong. And so my argument is that we should take on as MSPs adopting to a framework. If that's NIST, great. If that's CIS, great. If that's CSA, it'd be very weird as a provider, but great. If it was whatever it may be.
I get that question. I get this question a lot from the peers in my peer group and various MSPs. Like, where do we start? What do we do? Which
analysis
framework?
Paralysis.
Yeah, and exactly. We hear that term all the time, and I'm like, pick something, right?
You can't go wrong. Pick one.
And so back in August, I decided to put together this whole get your house in order stuff. Right.
Nice.
We're going to land on CIS top 18, and we're going to start walking MSPs through this on a week by week basis on getting their own house in order. The interesting part is now that we're a month and a half into it, we're going control by control, week after week. The interesting part that I find is it's the time issue, right? I hear this.
The cobbler's shoes problem, right?
Yeah, it's the mechanic with the jalopy in the yard, right?
Yeah.
The football coach that can't throw a pass or catch.
Right.
Or block.
I can't, but it's because my eyes don't point in the same direction. Like I just get hit in the face with a football.
Right. And so it's that old thing. Like if you never have the time to do it right, you're just never going to have the time to do it over, and you're just never going to make the time. And so, it's the accountability piece from an internal perspective. Like I'm an MSP. I'm hunting for the next dollar, the next client, the next
trying
thing. Trying to survive, right? Especially in this weird COVID world that we're in the last 18 to 24 months of trying to figure out new clients and lead gen and all the buzzwords that everybody's all talking about.
Right.
But if I'm not doing my diligence to keep my own house in order, and an hour a day, I can find an hour a day to look at one control and try to figure it out. Do I have it? Do I don't? At least at a minimum, stop gapping it, right?
Yeah.
Stop lighting it to figure out where do I stand. And as you said earlier, right? Moving the needle, right?
Right.
With that defensive lineman, like, okay, take a knee, get small. Okay, replace, at some point, do something.
Yeah.
And, we standardize on CIS 18 because just
It's
about
really
every-
prescriptive.
It
It's really
is.
prescriptive.
It
And
is.
you can have one control that you meet. So the nice thing about, and I get excited, Tim, so I'm going to pull my cord, but the nice thing about a CIS family of controls is that the controls themselves are written in a way that you could even improve inside that control and still meet it, right? It's like, hey, have a process to find devices on your enterprise list and know what your assets are, right? Know your software, know your devices. The first way might be a pencil and paper. I mean, it might be a damn spreadsheet. It might be your RMM. The later pieces might be, you know what? I'm going to set up my environment so that every time something touches Azure Active Directory, I'm going to have an automatic policy that brings that device into Intune, starts assessing its compliance space.
Right.
And even more importantly, I'm not going to let very sensitive data be touched, like lab tech, RMM, those things, unless you already come from a compliant device, right? And you can prove that you're on. So you can see how these things start out as not good enough. And it's fine. It's iterative. It's meant to be this improvement process. You don't go to a gym and go, man, I'm gonna crush out 300 sets today. I'm gonna be swole. No, you realize that it's an iterative process. You're gonna tear some muscle fibers. They're gonna come back together. There are gonna be more of them.
Exactly.
Tear some muscle fibers.
We probably spent the first 3 weeks all around the first two controls around hardware and software asset.
Bro, that's why I put those later in the family. No, I'm just
kidding. But honestly, like, something is better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
At a minimum, your RMM is going to get some of it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. At some point,
an 85% policy beats the crap out of zero.
Exactly. And at some point, software asset management will get better. I mean, it's awful, right?
It is.
We just talked today, like, one of my clients, for example, needs to get a certificate of occupancy for a new space they're moving into. In order to get the CO, they need to have insurance. The insurance company needs to know what they're insuring and what the value of that stuff. Do they need to know about the 50-cent thumb drive, or do they need to know about the $1,000 server? Like,
right.
Something is better than nothing. And so, start someplace. Start with the pen and paper, Abacus, tablet, whatever.
and document those improvements, right? Like, document my process today, Rev 2, Rev 1.5, Rev 3. Yeah. And what I'm getting at is, if you ever had to stand in front of 12 of your peers, if you ever had me cross-examining you on your choices as a defense person in a MSP, I would rather have something to say, yeah, I know. We realized this process wasn't good enough. We've moved it up 5 times. We plan on continuing to move it up. Showing that due care meets what's called the reasonable man rule. I like to call it the reasonable person rule to be inclusive, but it is termed the reasonable man rule. Yeah. And the point of that is to say, listen, would reasonable people think you've done what you were supposed to do in order to protect this? And that really is kind of the rule of thumb for that, right? And so I think the point is that showing iterative capabilities and showing improvement in process and documentation of that, people fear, well, if I put it out there and it's not good enough, I'm going to be hung by it. No, you should be able to use that exoneration to say, I've improved. I've obviously know I can't stop everything, but here's how I improved it from last year. Here's how I improved it from the last quarter. And so what I would say is, go through the CIS controls and shotgun it. Even if you know that you're lying to yourself. And I'll give you an example. So you're saying, know all software that exists on machines. Well, if you don't take away admin rights, you probably can never win that. So even though you're saying I have a process and you haven't taken away admin rights, you have to understand the hypocrisy in that statement, right? And so I think part of that is just acknowledging those things, acknowledging those gaps, starting to be aware of those gaps. That's all cybersecurity is. The other thing you kind of talked about that I think is really important is categorizing your data, categorizing what's more important, what's less important, right? At Iconic, I definitely would put prioritization over detecting anomalies in logins and access to an RMM significantly before I would deal with that on some marketing paperwork, right? Just a much different escalating levels of controls to meet the escalating level of value. You kind of tip this off with your conversation about the insurer wanting the insurance, right? Where's the value? Where is this? And yet we treat data as if everything's just the same, right? I'm just protecting my client. How? Show the escalatory nature and how you deal with it, right? For example, my technicians could sign in to a web device and access their email or access certain Teams things. But if they wanted to touch something like lab tech, they had to have a device health capability. We had to know that it was encrypted. We had to, why? Because that was part of my process to tell a very compliant story through automation and through escalation of controls. So that I can say, no, I didn't treat RMM just like my marketing data. I treated RMM with 5 extra controls and 5 other places where I tried to stop the threat actors from gaining access. I had extra role bait. And so what I'm saying is, like, someone said something about trained people, right? That was a really good point. Someone said, listen, small MSPs trying to have the resources trained to the right level. I think the great news about this is that there are a lot of peers starting to spring up to help solve this. You've got some factors playing in that make this even easier. I won't get into this talk track too deep, but we're heading towards a world where if an MSP started out and only chose to take in M365 clients, or only chose to take in Google platform clients or AWS desktop workspace platform clients, then you could actually have a compliancy framework and a security framework that's extremely automated, right? Extremely the same for every single client. I do this way, I repeat it this way for 500 clients. And when I find a flaw in it, I change the script and I repeat it that way for 500 clients.
Well, I mean, MSPs, we always talk about repeatable process, right?
Right.
There's a sign right in front of me on my wall that says, if you have to do it more than twice, script it.
You can script it. Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. That's hilarious
right?
and true.
And I've lived that way my whole life. Like, if you look at what running on my taskbar, it's usually Notepad, some kind of IDE editor, like, all day, every day.
Well, and scripting, especially when you start seeing, okay, so I like to think of this as how many variables are there. If you're trying to write a script for an infinite number of variables, you're always writing the script. However, if you're trying to write a script for a very limited set of variables, you have a very limited set of failure spaces and a very limited set of things that block the success. And so what I mean by that is, let's say you're in M365 and everybody has Azure AD and everybody has a P2 license and everybody has the ability to do conditional access. I could just have an onboarding script. When I want to set up a new client and they're coming on, I just click this box and it changes this type of controlled access. It sets up these policies. It teaches, make sure everybody has MFA and sets up that email string. I mean, you can start doing things that really make it a very predictable outcome for clients. So when I get to that thought process, the reason I say it is all the engineers and training you're looking for becomes conversations around business that can be talk tracks. That can be things that are simply the same repeated thing over and over again for all of your businesses and how you talk to them. Your QBR could be today we're focusing on controls 2 and 3, right? You can start getting into those things. And then when you come back, that person that got the client to sign off and say yes, clicks a box and the script fires, right? You start getting into the thing where we're not hiring the same type of people anymore.
Right.
If you look down the road 4 or 5 years, we're not hiring engineers, we're hiring business students, right? We're hiring people that can do sales in a hearts and minds basis, right? Taking away admin rights costs nothing.
Right.
Except for pain in the ass, support, structure, things like
trust
that.
me, I've literally gone through that this week alone with the CEO of one of my clients who was not happy. He didn't have admin rights. And
it shocks me when I do somewhere, right? And I think the point is that we have this change in culture and understanding of this, but it really is, security is a hearts and minds problem.
It is.
Right?
It's a culture problem, right? And so, I talk to my peers all about, like, companies are built on culture, right? Maybe it's Procter and Gamble and their culture is all around babies and diapers and formula. Like, they have a corporate culture that says babies first.
Right.
Doesn't say secure babies first. Doesn't say we're going to provide a secure environment so that we can put babies first. Right. And so, when I work with my clients, regardless of the industry, I try to help move that corporate culture to be a little more secure. Great example this morning. I sent the director an email saying, hey, now that we've got training in place, we should start doing phishing simulation.
Right.
And we should do this on a random once a month basis to your users.
Sounds like an iteration, an improvement in the status quo, Tim Golden. Interesting.
Exactly. And his response was, I love it. Hope I don't get phished.
Right.
Like, no pushback. No, what is this? No, like, and so 6 months ago, if I had asked that question, they'd have been like, phishing, like, no, we got Gmail. It blocks all that crap.
Yeah,
maybe.
Does it? If I want to write an email as Matt Lee, am I going to get stopped? Probably not, right? And I think that's the point, is that what's great about this is that's a control. If I remember correctly, that's 14 on CIS, right? Is training and phishing and iterations. And what's great is you're doing it, you being the proletariat, right, of MSPs, they're coming in saying, we need to do security training now. Why? Well, because it's a good thing. because it's one of the 18 that some third-party industry standard has said will reduce your risk by 85%. Do you want to do one of those? No problem. I'm going to write down that you didn't want to do that. I want to make sure I documented our conversation. My attorney's going to do that. My psychologist is going to do that. My doctor's going to do that. Right. All of those things. We have to start acting like professional services. We have to start acting like we are an educator. We are an empowerment for them, and we are a pro-service engagement. Right. And so when you start thinking about that, my doctor doesn't have to teach me how the aromatase inhibitor causes this protein to take over aromatase and it causes testosterone to, I just trust them.
Right.
And the challenge is that we don't have that same afforded trust. We're a commodity.
We are. And that's been probably the ongoing challenge of, the iteration again of MSPs from break fix to MRR to seasoned professionals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to become like attorneys. I mean, I think as you see this play out, I think a lot of things will happen in that regard. But I think it starts with the ability to prove you did what you could to protect the data. Right. I think that's the first thing. I think as we go, though, we're going to start being a lot more like the CPA and the attorney. And when my attorney says, Matt, I don't think you should publish that. This is going to cause you some problems with these 19 NDAs you solved. Right. That type of consultative information, if I don't listen to it, you know what that attorney's doing? Talk to Matt Lee about the defensibility of his choice to do this. He might be creating something I can't defend him from. I went ahead and documented that. Is that so that attorney can beat me with it? No, it's because that attorney knows that his or her professional license is on the line based on giving that advice.
Yeah.
And I think we don't have that. There's no closed loop to make me not be an MSP other than suing me out of existence. Right. There's not a licensure. There's not an approval board. There's not a review board. If my doctor kills me, there's a medical review board for that. There are things that can actually end their ability to kill the next person. As an MSP, when we, sure.
But there's organizations trying.
That's true. Yeah. And I think what we will have, do MSPs not have the respect, or do they not demand and command the respect? Yeah, absolutely, Jennifer. Gosh, I love you.
Great question,
so,
Jennifer.
The question was, do MSPs not have that respect, or do they not demand or command that respect? I think you're talking about a chicken and an egg here, right? I think you're absolutely accurate. People do not discount the information I share with them. It's because I've chosen not to let them. I've chosen to be respected in that regard. I've chosen to ask for that respect. And I've actually chosen to differentiate myself from the commodity. The commodity is buying anti-malware software. The commodity is buying an email protection. The commodity is buying email. The commodity is getting my computer fixed. But we're kind of seeing this convergence where we're not a commodity anymore. And I think we have to command that. I think we have to walk in and say, hi, if you don't have MFA, I'm probably not going to keep you around very long. Why? Well, because that's the single thing that can make a big difference in your life. And I don't want to take that risk. And I don't want my insurance company subrogating to me as your MSP for not turning on MFA. Furthermore, I'm going to write down that I talked to you about MFA. And if you don't do it, it's okay. I'll still love you. I'll love you at your funeral, but I'll still love you. And it's not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's commanding the understanding that I'm giving you empirical data that I know to be true. And I think the challenge comes from, Jennifer, MSPs don't have a barrier to entry. There's nothing to say I've done anything. My hairdresser has a 9-week class to go cut my beard and a license from the state and a board of cosmetology that could take their license away. And yet I can destroy a company in 5 minutes by being their IT provider.
Yeah.
Right?
It's mind-boggling.
It's crazy. And I think what you have that comes out of that is an exact part of this. We created ourselves as a commodity because we had no barrier to entry. We had nothing that said we had any standard of care. There is no like when I was an MSP and I decided to put firewalls in our contract, and I decided to put anti-malware, and I decided to put the backup, and I decided to put all those as part of our contract, it was only because I decided to. It wasn't because somebody gave me some guidance. It wasn't because FINRA says that if you're going to replace an existing investment, you have to prove that you've done this with a certain amount of due care. If you're going to replace the insurability of someone to an older level of insurability at age, and you do that enough times, your compliance department is going to kick you. You're going to lose your license. You're not going to do this anymore. There's none of that for MSPs. We always talk about the trunk slammers, right? We always feel like we're on the other side of that. I mean, myself too. But I think even that is just hypocrisy. I think even that is some of our own arrogance. And I think the challenge is, Jennifer, until we figure out how we fix some of those things and demand better of ourselves and demand better of, the providership space, and the government guides that in some ways with some regulation, or we self-regulate, I think that we're going to stay in some space where the overall image of us is an average. And if 30% of that average is absolutely telling people the wrong things and absolutely sending them down a bad path and absolutely not standing up for the things that matter, then there's always going to be a path for people to go to that'll tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
There's not going to be very many doctors that say, you know what, Matt, bro, I know you got stage 4 cancer. This is great. Why don't we get you on a vitamin C therapy? I'm going to take you out to my holistic doc. No, they're going to do defensible actions of chemotherapy as a suggestion, and radiation and all the applicable things for that particular thing. And they have a guide to do it by. We've chosen to ignore those guides heretofore. And I think what I'm getting at, and you were already prescient on that. I'm trying to see how many words I can use that have like high values in words, but you were very ahead of the game on that, in that you are saying, hey, let's align to CIS. Let's give ourselves an improvement. We'll go through each one of them, try to get our house in order, right? Yeah. But in the same breath, that same mechanic helps you talk to your client about that, right? If you say, I know that this is how I'm going to get my house in order. I'm going to do these 18 things. I'm going to get done. When you go to talk to them, you're experienced in that.
Right.
You already know it. You believe it. You've done it. You can point to yourself and say, I've done it here. There was no client I had that had a higher level of security standard than Iconic, period. The things we were doing were meant to be able to say, yeah, we do it too. It's annoying. We get it. Right.
Yeah. And I think, that brings an extra level of credibility to your MSP, right? So I talk to a lot of MSPs that have HIPAA clients, covered entities, and they, and they all talk about, what do you use for a tool? How do you deal with HIPAA? Like, okay, first of all, we can all say you can't tool your way into compliance, period.
Negative. You make it easier.
You make it easier. But here's the thing, when I talk to them and I try to help guide them down a path, be it HIPAA or whatever framework, I ask them, like, have you done a HIPAA assessment on yourself? Have you done a 171 assessment on yourself? Like, even if you don't have clients and you're thinking about prospecting in those areas, practice on yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and it comes to that defensibility, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to help you be secure. I haven't done any of these things, and I'm a giant risk to you. In fact, I'm your largest risk, period. Definitely do business with me.
Yeah.
Right?
I noodled the idea of like eatyourownDogFood.com, and my wife totally shot it down, I think. But I do think, like, we don't do that, right?
No. Or if we do, we don't do it with any purpose or intention. And we certainly don't do it holistically, right? So I think that's a fair argument. But I think standing in front of 12 peers and saying, yep, I've followed all of those controls. Here's where I've iterated on 7 of those. Here's the things I can't do right now. Here's the battles I can't win. That is so much more of a transparent and honest answer that says you know what you're doing, right? And I am a fan of transparency. I would rather just lay it all out there. I think it's, it should be massively part of what we decide to do.
Wait, where's my transparency meme?
You have a transparency meme? That's awesome.
Somewhere.
Yeah. I believe in transparency and humility, right? I'm going to fail. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to show you how I make them better. I'm going to show you. And Pax 8 so far is letting me do that and be very transparent about our failings, but still convenience often wins over security. And I'll tell you a story from the Pax 8 headlines, right? We use JWT, or JSON Web Tokens. If anybody's not familiar with that term, it's basically a magic key to sign in.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, you do?
I do, because I think I might have pinged you on it.
You did, and you're a good man for it. It was a very good win for me. And you think about it, and the question was, okay, why do we do these? Well, a lot of MSPs hire third-party payers, and they don't want to give them an account to their sign-in, and so we want to be able to just get them in so they can pay, and everything's great. Great. That's very convenient. Maybe the MSP should be told you do need an account for them. Maybe the MSP should be told, no, you shouldn't do that. And so the win I got out of that wasn't this complete discontinuation of these JSON Web Tokens, but what I did get out of that was the ability to let people opt out, right? And, that's just my first win. Later, I'd love to never have that. I think everyone should be attributable. I think everything you do should be attributable to a human, which does get me kind of on that thought, in the sense that the other thing MSPs have to understand is that immutability is key to defensibility. Immutability meaning that my actions happened. Everybody can prove they happened. They'll stand under forensic inspection. I did this action, or I did not do this action. When you use a shared admin account, or when you use something that's not tied to Tim Golden, but it's tied to admin@johndoe.local, you have no immutability of your action. You can't say Tim did that or Tim didn't do that, because the credentials are shared. The credentials could be shared with the client. The credentials could be in a situation where I'm not really Tim. And that brings us all back to like identity-centric models, where the actions are immutably identity-centric. They're tied to Tim. They're tied to the Microsoft account. I've been doing a lot of work with Microsoft on this. There's some changes coming in January that will make a lot of that much more possible. You will also hate some parts of it, so I apologize. I can't say them, but there's some great things in there that they're going to add to that. Tim did the action or Tim didn't do the action in every Microsoft tenant. And so now as you start looking at how that plays out, you can show the actions. Yes, I did improve the client. We did turn this off. Yes, I did. Oh, now there's where the client admin turned this. Yeah, it's defensibility. It's about being able to have the evidence necessary that's not poisoned, that's not tainted, that's immutable, it's referenceable to say, I did this action. And I'm getting a little in the weeds because that's not really what I'm hoping to tell MSPs. You shouldn't become an expert in this. I'm just saying that when you're doing things, try to ask the question is this a defensible decision? And if so, by what right? If you find that answer to be because I think it's good over and over without any other referenceable objects, then you're just basically saying, I think I could win against this cross-examining attorney in court. I would be able to defend this. And everybody go, oh, Matt made that up. Oh man, you're good. I don't even get that credit.
Right.
I want referenceable objects. Yeah. So it does go toward defensibility. And so I think that there's controls that start talking about logging, right? That start talking about having this data, and you start getting into, well, client, why do I need a SIEM? Why do I need MDR? Why do I need these extra things? Because they're the iterative controls on what we're already doing. It's one thing to have the malware. It's another to be doing threat hunting, right? The latter being a lot more proactive and trying to find those things instead of this reactive kind of model. So I think though that we're really needing to have some standards we all adopt and start to use that as a common language. You know, at PAX 8, they're converting our SSC team is now going to speak completely in CIS. My vendors are going to self-map to the CIS controls with their tools so that you can look at it as a cross-sell matrix, which means now as you're sitting there with a client, you're going, hey, we need to move forward. Let me show you how my things that I do already cover a lot of this. Check. And let me show you the things I need your help on, right? Let me show you the things I need your hearts and minds, because security isn't tools. Nobody that's going to go get a back surgery, and they know that that could be the single biggest choice in their life. Go have a surgery that could potentially put you in even worse shape or better. Do they go, man, I hear that surgeon Tim Golden's using the Scalpel 6000. Bro, I got to get in on that Scalpel 6000 action. I'm not going to go to Scalpel 5000. No, they go, I want to find the surgeon. I need Tim Golden to do a good job. They don't give a shit about the scalpel. No, yet our industry is so focused on the scalpel. We're so focused on the tools. We're so focused on the marketing saying, I'm going to stop all malware. I'm going to be the MSP that protects you. I'm going to be no, it really has to shift to, I'm a knowledgeable expert that can help you look at risk, reduce that risk, and make decisions on how you go forward as an advisor. And all the way back to Jennifer's question, that is the difference, is being in that position where you're the surgeon, not the Scalpel 5000, right?
So you're literally taking words out of my mouth that I use all day, every day.
Good.
I use a little, I mean, I love analogies. I generally use the Amish carpenter. Right?
Okay. All
so
right.
Who do you want to build, you know, your beautiful hope chest, right?
True story.
Do you want the high school kid with a hammer and a chisel, or do you want the Amish craftsman?
Yeah, that's been doing this for their entire beard growth life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I like to think I'm progressing towards that Amish carpenter, right? Like I know
we should all be,
you know, and literally this morning on Facebook, back and forth, somebody posted like, hey, who uses blah, 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 blah tool for compliance?
Right.
So I get on PM with him and I'm like, tools are great. They're only as good as the person wielding them. Where is the human? Where is the expert in the field? Like
that's the problem. I mean, there are tools out there that say, oh, we'll automate all of this. Yeah. Scope. How small is that scope then if you're able to do that? Would you limit it to 6 variables?
Don't even get me going.
I hate seeing that. I hate seeing tools that say we're going to automate your compliance.
Well, not only that, but they say, hey, buy our tool and make millions in CMMC.
Yeah, right. I actually got accused and feel like I might have had some portion of that. So, you know, I sit on a lot of vendor boards, right? And so I'm on about 26 different vendor advisory panels and different various organizations. And so I started my big track. I believed in CMMC as the answer. I was wrong. I wasn't wrong because CMMC is not the right answer. I think it really could be in the sense that it's an audited framework. There's a third-party person being paid to tell whether or not I've done things under these requirements. And then on top of it, there's a review board that validates that those third-party auditors aren't just pencil whipping it, right? So you have this really cool process. The challenge is, and this brings me back to earlier, if I walked into a client and said, listen, I want to help you go down CMMC, they're going to go, I don't have CUI. I mean, they probably wouldn't know that, but the point is, it's not always applicable. CIS is always applicable. There is zero situation where CIS is not applicable.
Well, and here's the thing. So CIS can cross-map.
Yes.
I mean, and I,
It does cross map.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
we should dig into this a little bit at some point, because when you look at frameworks, when you look at all the RMF tools that are out there for frameworks, right? At some point, everything goes back to 853.
Yeah, the granddaddy.
Right?
Or 800/171 as its extensibility, but yeah, pretty much.
No, they all go back to 853 and 171, and so even CIS maps along the way. So I love using CIS because it's obtainable.
Yep.
When you look at, well, so Rev 5 853 now is 1,009 controls.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
There's only 56 in the IG1 on CIS, right? There's
right.
56.
You're never going to make that. I mean, you can, and I mean, I have to adhere to Rev 5 now too. Thank God I can inherit some and blah, blah, whatever, but
yeah,
hybrid and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think, so let me ask this. We got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
We talked a lot about CIS. We talked a lot about defensibility and being able to prove that we can do and that we are moving the needle, right?
Yeah.
How do we as a community continue to bring this message forward, right? How do we help continue to help? Like, yeah, we have 10 or 12 people here today that are listening, and great. We're glad you're here. How can we, as our 10 or 12 people here and the rest of us, like, grow this knowledge and build that community base around, security culture first, not tool, break, fix, mindset, whatever.
Yeah. I think there's a lot that goes into that answer. That actually has like hours of content. I know. But, I think the challenge is that the needle's being moved for us, or at least the playing field is being moved for us in some ways. We're starting to see enough loss. We're starting to see enough realization. I mean, the minute you have people putting gasoline in a trash bag in the East Coast of the United States, you start seeing the public be more aware. You've had 3 presidential orders, executive orders about cybersecurity. You've had publicity around national intervention in our election space. You have a lot of awareness happening, right? So the first part is you're starting to see people at least wrestle with the fact that there is a problem. You can't do anything without that, right? And in the sense that you have to first see that there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get that, I think it's really about shifting the conversation from one of, fear and let's just talk about this big, bad, scary thing into one of just saying, my job and your job is to protect people's data. That's it. That's our only job.
Yeah.
Our job is to find where the data lives and protect it. And so if you start thinking about that, sometimes we don't even own the data.
Yeah.
I wrote an article for Haunted Hacker Magazine. It's going to come out in a couple days, or I guess the 31st. But it's really talking about that difference between compliance and security. And I think what it comes from is education. This is a pedagogical endeavor, right? Our jobs are to start talking to our clients about their responsibility, right? Great job, Brian, 100%. Clients are willing to have the conversation. They're going, hey, well, what's this security thing? Oh, security equals data.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me throw this question out to the audience.
Sure.
and type in either yes or no in the chat, right?
Nice.
How many of you, yes or not how many, yes or no, do you have identity theft protection for yourself or your spouse or a family member? And there's a reason why I'm asking.
Yeah.
No. Anyone else? No. Interesting.
I do.
Yeah, interesting. The reason why I'm asking is back up 5, 7, even 4 or 5 years, right? There's all kinds of things in the news and the paper and the Facebook everywhere, all about identity theft protection, right?
Right.
And from like, we're not talking companies, we're not talking MSPs, we're talking me as a human. I want to protect my identity, right? And there was national campaigns all over Facebook, Twitter, the new, all of that stuff, right? And yet nobody has identity theft protection, at least in the chat, right? Which is really interesting, right? That there was this big national awareness and campaign all around identity theft protection, right? You hear it in the news, blah, blah, blah. But yet we as individuals haven't even like heeded to the advice and the marketing and all the fluff around it. It's just an interesting thing. Like, how can we expect the same change in cybersecurity? Right? It's just, I don't know. It was really fascinating to me to think a little bit about, well, identity theft protection, which is different but similar.
Yeah. Well, but you're hitting a point. I think, you start looking at most things in this world that people don't want to do because they are inconvenient only happen through legislation, regulation, and enforcement, right? Like you have homeowners insurance. How many people would have homeowners insurance if you didn't have a requirement to have homeowners insurance as part of every mortgage you've ever seen, right? How many people would have fire protection at their business if they didn't have those things as forced requirements?
Right.
How many people would put studs 12 inches on center if they didn't have a building regulation that forced them not to use 16-inch center studs for price?
Yeah.
Right. You start getting into these things where, as an industry, technology itself, IT, technology, computers, computing, portable access to internet, sharing of information, very young, very, very young.
Mm-hmm.
You look at cars were invented in the mid 1800s, late 1800s. You first had your engine on a vehicle of conveyance, and you didn't have a seatbelt till 1985 as a requirement. Right. And you start getting into these things where, the Industrial Revolution, there weren't regulations on locking doors. So people put a bunch of women in a sewing room, locked the doors until their break time, and they burned to death when there was a fire. And until you have those things, we don't have that legislation. You don't have that maturation. The difference is a steam engine only gained in steam engine capability over 50 years. We've done this over 5 and 2 and 7, and right. It's really tough.
So what you're saying is accountability.
Yeah. Accountability, understanding of failures of past, and we're just now starting to see it with these executive orders around zero trust, around, if you look, there was an executive order a couple of years ago that kind of talked about MFA and you should have multi-factor. Now you have, I don't know if anybody read this, but a couple of weeks ago, the new presidential order around zero trust had a clarification that said, hey, if you're using TOTP methodologies or other MFA methodologies or push methodologies, those are not secure. Like literally 80% of the MFA out there is not being considered secure. Yep. And yet how many people would even say that? How many even have the MFA yet? How many people even have the single sign-on? You're starting to see,
my federal client just came back with a questionnaire about MFA and forcing PIV. Well, you can't see it, but forcing PIV.
No, CAC cards or U2F, FIDO. Protocols that are defensible in that way. And it's a hard challenge, but I do think this battle gets won on the one-to-one. I think this battle gets won on the Tim Golden, Alan Miller, right? Talking with a client and winning that heart and mind and understanding that this is an endeavor to reduce risk, right? Here at PAX 8, one of our choices is talking about risk. We always talk about risk. There is risk in us configuring security protocols for people. Lots of risk, insurance subrogation risk. So, you have to think about that and say, okay, are we willing to take on this risk? We should talk to our clients about this in the form of not IT, not viruses, not security, just pure plain risk, right? This is business risk. I'm not falling in the category of IT. I'm not falling in the category of IT security. I'm falling under business risk. What's my business risk? Well, if you get pwned and someone is able to take your accounts payable accounts, set up sister domains for you, and then spoof you and steal that money, you had a business financial risk of $1.5 million not getting paid from your client. As long as you can survive that until you do collect that money, or maybe you never do, then you're good. Oh God, that'd be horrible. No, I need, great. We're not talking about IT. Everything is in this. This is talking about everything around how your business functions around risk. And when you decide not to have MFA, that is a choice for risk. If you decide not to use single sign-on, it's a choice for risk. If you decide not to put in security controls on anti-malware, that's a choice for risk. If you decide not to, right? They're all risk conversations and they're empirical risk.
Right.
And we're starting to see that come from the insurance businesses. We're starting to see that come from the banking. It's going to start making lending requirements around these things. And
I love working with insurance industries for MSP clients because they understand risk.
Right.
And
you could say that to them and they get it.
They make really great MSP clients because they get risk, right? It's just, so let's see. We got about 5 minutes left. Matt, is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we haven't covered?
Oh gosh, that's not a fair question. I have a million things I'd like to cover. But no, I think for the intent today, my goal was to say, try to start building actual defensibility. Write down the process. Look at control 1 and say, what did it look like today? and do a histogram, right? Start building defensibility and how you improve that control over time, how you improve that as the way you do business and the way you operate for your clients. And then start using that in your sales material. Start using that in your client marketing material. Start using that to say, hey, I just want you to understand, everybody else wants to confuse you about security as if we're the smart people. We're not. Here's what we're trying to do. There's 18 of them. We're trying to follow them. We're trying to improve upon them. And here's how I've done it. There are 56 sub-controls in IG1. I'm also at IG2 now. I'm also at IG3 now. All I need you, client, to do is move one football, one time. Do this one this month. Do this one next month. And what you're going to start seeing is a sales matrix, right? You're going to start seeing the points in which new revenue is going to come in. Okay, this client said they're going to do control 10 with me and go to an improvement and actually bring on a SIEM and an MDR, and we're going to do that in third quarter. You start laying out a roadmap for revenue. You start laying out that. So I would just ask that people start following CIS controls. And then the last thing I'll leave it with is, if you do not feel you have the accountability built in your organization, if you do not feel like you have the accountability built into yourself as a human to do these things and to iterate and to move forward, then hire someone, right? Go to a peer group, go to someone that can hold you accountable. I happen to have a ton of internal drive, right? But I still like the accountability of peers saying, did you do this? You know, if you look back at the success of Iconic, it would not have happened if it was not for peer groups, if it was not for other people saying, hey, have you got this done yet? Hey, you said you're going to do this. Why isn't this done yet? And that comes back to your question on time, right? When you started saying, yeah, but I just don't have time to do these things. Horseshit. You had time to go have beers after lunch. You had time to, right? That's horseshit. You just don't have anybody holding you accountable. Exactly. And I think that that is the most mature decision you can make as an MSP is, can I do this myself, or do I need to be held accountable from peers? And so I would say that, you know, Tim, that's one of your things, right? Is accountability. That's one of the things I'm trying to drive in our peer groups and what we're doing. And so I would say, you know, accountability probably moves the needle more than anything else. If you've got to get on a call with me and you told me next month you're going to write your policy on MFA and bring your own devices and you didn't do it, you're going to have to come tell me you didn't do it. And people hate that. We don't like being called out. We don't like being wrong. And so what you end up doing is cramming the day before and writing the damn policy. But guess what? It's written. Congrats. Right? Like that's all the point was. Right. And then the last thing is, don't let compliance be an artificial way to tell you've done something. Live security. Live the controls. Live them. Don't just write them down. It can't just be this dead document that sits on a desk and I do nothing. That is the whole point of CMMC. That is the whole point of SOC 2 Type 2, is to show the movie of you actually doing this, operationalizing this in your life. And oh gosh, I totally just realized I've been replying to Brian and I've been just replying to you, Tim. So like, I mean, Brian, yeah, 100%, bro. like you can break most passwords under 16 characters in MFA in under 2 minutes. You can evil jinx it. You can steal those. You can trick them out, and there's 1,000 ways to do this. Yeah, 100%. You know, and a great example of that is an iterative control. Let's say I put in that I'm going to have my tokens expire every 15 days on my FIDO token or my OAuth tokens with Microsoft, let's say, right? Your sign-in details. An iteration of that would be, I'm also not going to make them persistent. So every time someone closes the browser and they reopen, they're going to have to sign in. Wow, man, that's a pain in the ass. But guess what it does? When I steal your token with Evil Jinx, I don't have 2 weeks to play with it before it expires. It's expired as soon as I try to touch it. It's not on the same device. It's not persistent. Yep. And so you start seeing these iterative things that if you can defend that and you go into court and have to say, yeah, the way we handled this with our conditional access for all of our clients initially was this policy, and we did it with a 15-day expiration. But we started iterating and telling our clients we're going to move to these non-persistent. Those are all steps that defend your actions, that say, holy crap, they tried to protect them and they did their best efforts and then didn't succeed. Right. Because you're going to lose. Yeah, you did your due care in that case. Yeah, and so, you know, you can't ever win. All you can do is win in proving that you did what you could to try to win that football game. No coach is going to come in and say, I'm going to win every single football game. Maybe Bill Belichick. No coach comes, and actually technically the Cardinals right now. Like
the Cardinals. I don't know. This year my Patriots aren't doing so well.
But, you know, I think the point is that coach knows that they're not going to win every game. We have lied to ourselves. I almost get kicked off of a vendor panel that was talking about, it was called the Malware Free Webinar. And then they had this big logo right under my face. I'm like, I'm not talking over that. I have malware on my computer right now. I know of it. I wrote it myself. I'm not going to say it's malware free. This is stupid. But our vendors only win by saying, we're going to stop all threats. Add this and you'll have the S in your MSSP. Do that. Those are all bullshit. They're all histrionics meant to sell. And the challenge is we're trying to fight against that to sell to people and say, no, you're not protected. You're not. I'm going to put Sentinel-1 on. It's going to help. But right now I can do a reverse TCP shell and Sentinel-1 out of PowerShell and it never detects it. Right now. to this minute. I can steal data out of SentinelOne, no problem. The point is, I'm not that good. I'm a script kiddie in comparison to some of these people out there. So, you really get into, it's much easier to talk about defensibility than defense. In the sense that you're not going to stop everything. You need to have defensible actions. The client needs defensible actions. When you start getting in, and we're out over time, when you start getting into privacy laws, it's about, did you lose the data or not? And when you start getting there, defensibility isn't even enough. So the defensibility becomes the flexing of your muscles, the going to the gym, the doing those efforts so that you can hope to reduce that bell curve down to 12%, 11%, and not have as many things that aren't covered as methodologies to kind of limit the damage, right? Limit the risk, limit the impact of setting incumbent attacks. So anyways, I guess that's everything. I've already lost one person because I'm over time. So I'm done. Swear to God.
No, it's good. I think, I think these kinds of conversations are good. I appreciate you taking the time. For those of you, I'm going to just kind of do a little shameless plug here, drop this in chat. For those of you that are interested, we'll be rolling out our next iteration of getting your house in order.
Nice.
Brian's already part of this iteration that we've been going
Awesome.
through. We'll be wrapping that up here in November and starting a new one, probably December, January. 3 months. Week every single week we'll be we'll be looking at the CIS controls, and I'll be walking you through them, literally, me live, not some canned crap, answering your specific questions, right? Answering your specific questions, helping you through the controls, as Matt said, holding you accountable, right?
Yeah, it's accurate.
And I think that's, like everybody says, that's the biggest challenge, is the time and the accountability. Well, now you're going to answer to me, and I might call you out in front of all the other people or not, but
yeah, that's huge.
So
yeah, and I think if you do that, I think you'll be closer to being ready for the cliff that's coming for MSPs. Our world will not be the same in 5 years as it is today. I can guarantee you that.
I think it's even quicker than that, but
I've been told I'm wrong on the time all the time, so I try to elongate it. Is elongate a word? I don't think so. I try to elongate it.
Lengthen it.
Lengthen works.
Lengthen works. Yeah.
All right, y'all.
All right, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And this concludes today's episode of the Compliancy Guys.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.